Hi guys. Sorry about class last week. My Zoom was not working. It just had other plans for me that week. I tried to restart my computer and nothing worked. So, what I'm going to do is just do things a little bit differently. You're going to watch a video instead of sitting in a class, and you have a worksheet to kind of go with it. So, with your worksheet, if you want to open to page 1 now, today we're going to learn one of the most effective counseling approaches that's used in substance use treatment, which is motivational interviewing. It's also called MI. So here's what makes it different from a lot of what you've studied so far. Most counseling approaches tell you what to do, and motivational interviewing kind of teaches you how to be with another person while they struggle with change. And that matters because of who is going to walk in your office, right? So some of your clients will be sent by a judge. Some will be there because their spouse wanted them to come in, an employer, even Child Protective Services. So some will genuinely want help, and others will feel kind of trapped between wanting a different life and wanting it to stay exactly where it is. So rather than convincing people to change, motivational interviewing asks a different question. How can we help people discover their own reasons for change? So before we go into this theory, I want to make it personal because motivational interviewing does not make sense of an abstraction. It only makes sense if you have felt it. That's why I designed this worksheet to go along with this teaching today. So I want you to think about a time where you tried to change something in your own life. It does not have to be dramatic. So exercising more, eating differently, spending less, getting off your phone, sleeping more, drinking more water, procrastinating less. So I want you to pause the video and go to your worksheet. Write it down. Section 1 on your worksheet. What was the change? What made you decide you wanted something different? And were you successful the first time? If you've paused the video, welcome back. I'm going to guess that for most of you, the answer to the last question was no, not the first time. And I want to ask you something about it. Why is changing behavior so hard? Even when we already know that this behavior isn't helping us. So when I ask this, if the class was live, I usually hear the same answers every time. I wasn't ready. I liked the comfort of it. I kept making excuses. I knew what to do. I just did not actually want to do it. And maybe there's too much going on in my life right now. So most people already know what they should do, and knowing is not the hard part, changing is. Now I'm going to make this personal for you guys in a second way. Think about a time that someone told you what you should do. You should lose weight. You should quit smoking. You should stop procrastinating. You should save more money. Did hearing that instantly motivate you? Of course not. And I want you to notice what it actually did produce, because that list is the entire reason that motivational interviewing actually exists. So usually defense, resistance, judgment, ashamed, angry. Now on the worksheet, I want you to circle the words that match your own experience and maybe add anything that is missing. So pause the video right now and do this exercise. Welcome back. Here's the uncomfortable part. Every person who said those things to you probably meant well. They're probably not trying to shame you. Well, maybe not all of them meant well. They cared about you, and it still produced that list. So as counselors, we want to help. We want to help someone so badly that sometimes we accidentally become the expert in someone else's life. And motivational interviewing reminds us that clients are the experts on themselves. All right, section 2. So let's start with a definition, and then I'm going to kind of take it apart word by word. Motivational interviewing is a collaborative, person-centered style of communication designed to strengthen a person's own motivation and commitment to change. So I want you to think about that definition, and I want you to think about it, and I want you to write it down. So if you need to pause and go back for a moment, I want you to write it down. That's kind of the point here. I want to hear some of those words again, okay? Collaborative, person-centered, strengthen, their own motivation, not our motivation, right? Theirs. So motivational interviewing was developed by William Miller in the early 1980s. And while he was working with people who had alcohol use disorders. And you have to understand what addiction treatment actually looked like back then. It often relied on confrontation. Clients were challenged, argued with, sometimes shamed into admitting that they had a problem. And the working assumption was that resistance meant denial, and that denial had to be broken through. And Miller noticed that this did not work. The harder that the counselors argued for change, the harder the clients argued against it. So if you sit with that for a second, right? They thought that they were doing well. Maybe it doesn't feel intuitive. But if I say you need to quit drinking, the client says, it's not that bad. How many people have had one of those? If you say, you're hurting your family, the client says, oh, that's an exaggeration. The harder we push, the harder the client sometimes pushes back. So this has a name. We call it the writing reflex. As helpers, we are wired to fix problems. We hear pain, we immediately reach for a solution, advice, resources, a plan. It's not a character flaw. It's the instinct that brought you most into the field, right? But sometimes the desire to fix becomes the barrier. So let me ask you this. Can you think of a profession where the writing reflex is exactly right? Maybe that's doctors, firefighters, paramedics, police. If someone's having a heart attack, you do not ask how they feel about receiving CPR. You just do it. In those professions, the writing reflex saves lives. But counseling is different. And this is why behavior change cannot be forced. It has to be chosen. Which brings us to what might be the most radical assumption of motivational interviewing. People are likely to believe what they hear themselves say more than what they hear someone else say. So we're going to pause for a second and we're going to write that sentence and what it means for the counselor's job. So that's section 2 on your worksheet. So if you're watching the video, I want you to stop the video and write down what you think that means for our job in one or two sentences. Here is where I would steer you. If people believe their own words more than ours, then clients do not get convinced. They convince themselves. And our job stops being installing motivation and starts being kind of drawing it out. So motivational interviewing is not really a collection of techniques. If you treat it as a technique, clients feel it and it stops working. It's a way of relating to another human being. So here's the 4 elements that make up what we call motivational interviewing: partnership, acceptance, compassion, and evocation. We work with clients not on clients. So we're thinking about the difference between sitting across from someone and maybe sitting beside them. Partnership means that the client is not a problem you are solving. They are a person that we're just kind of thinking alongside with. Acceptance. We recognize that every person has an inherent worth. And I want to be precise here because students get stuck on this one. Acceptance does not mean approving of every behavior. It means respecting the person regardless of the behavior. Can you accept someone without approving of everything that they do? You already do this, right? We all do this with people that we love. The skill is doing it on purpose with somebody that you just met. Compassion. Our work is the service of the client's well-being, not our need for them to be successful. So this one has a little bite to it, right? Sometimes counselors get attached to being the one who changed the client. It feels like a dedication. It feels like I had a really good session if a client made a huge change, right? And that's actually ego talking, and clients can feel that. Motivational interviewing asks us to kind of set that down. Evocation. This is the one that I would kind of paint on the wall, okay? Evocation means that we believe that clients already possess strengths, values, hopes, and reasons for change. And our job is to help uncover them. Instead of putting motivation into someone else, we help draw it out. So on your worksheet, I want you to write each of the 4 elements in your own words, not the definition that I just gave, but your own words. So partnership, acceptance, compassion, and evocation. All right. So we've spent the first 2 parts kind of talking about how we think about the clients rather than what we say to them. And that was on purpose because motivational interviewing is not a script. It's not a list of magic questions. It's not a trick that to make people change. It's a way of having conversations that lowers defensiveness and raises self-exploration. Now I want you to watch the difference. Okay, normally in this section where my computer was working, I would have pulled up a volunteer for this. And since we're doing this on video, you get to kind of see me playing both parts. And you're going to have to forgive me for my really poor acting skills, okay? So we're going to talk about this client named Marcus. So our client is a 35-year-old man named Marcus. Marcus got a DUI 6 weeks ago. His wife is threatening separation. His employer has put him on probation. He's agreed to counseling because everyone in his life keeps telling him that he drinks too much. And what Marcus says when he sits down to this is, I am not an alcoholic. Everybody drinks and I just happen to get caught. So on your worksheet, section 3 is a 2-column tracking sheet. I want you to open it and take some notes during these conversations. Okay, your job is just to watch, notice how Marcus responds emotionally, notice what he says and how he sounds. Okay, and I'm going to, again, try to play both parts. I'm the counselor. Marcus, tell me what brings you in today. Marcus, my wife tells me I drink too much. I don't really think I do. Counselor, well, based on what you've told me, I would say that your drinking is causing some serious problems. Marcus, maybe. Counselor, you got a DUI. Sounds like your marriage is struggling, and those are not small issues. Marcus, people get DUIs all the time. Counselor, yes, but drinking like that is not healthy. Have you thought about stopping? Marcus, not really. Counselor, do you think your wife maybe deserves better? Marcus, she's not perfect either. Counselor, if you do not stop, things could get much worse. Marcus, I said I'm here, didn't I? I'm here. Counselor, what is it going to take you before you admit that alcohol is the problem? Marcus, maybe this is not going to help. So pause it here, and I want you to finish your left column. Do that before you hear me talk about it, because your own noticing is worth more than mine. So pause your video here, finish your column, and then hit play again. So what happened? When I run this live, the room gives me the same words every time. He got defensive, he shut down, he argued, he minimized, he blamed his wife, he stopped talking. Now here's the question that always changes the temperature in the room. Did the counselor say anything factually wrong? Nope. Everything the counselor said was true. The DUI was real. Him hurting his marriage is real. The risk is real. But accuracy alone does not create motivation. I also want you to notice one more thing, which is the whole reason why we're doing this demo. Who spent more time talking about change? The counselor. Who spent time defending the drinking? Marcus. In motivational interviewing, there's a saying for this: whoever argues for change loses. That's a really beautiful quote. You should again take that, pin it somewhere. Whoever argues for change loses. Because the person who is doing the arguing is usually rehearsing their own position. This is true in couples therapy too. Marcus spent the entire session getting better at explaining why he didn't need to change. He walked out more convinced than he walked in. And we, as the counselor, helped him do that. People become more committed to the arguments when they hear themselves make them. And that cuts in both directions. Okay, so we're going to do this again, and I want you to also notice, okay? So same thing. I want you to notice the difference, okay? And again, excuse my really poor non-acting here, but I hope you get it. So counselor, Marcus, what did you make of everything that happened recently? Marcus, honestly, I think everyone's overreacting. Counselor, it sounds like you feel that people are making this into a much bigger deal than you see it. Marcus, exactly. Counselor, and at the same time, something was important enough that you decided to come in today. Marcus, well, yeah, my wife is pretty upset. Counselor, your relationship matters to you. Marcus, yeah, she's been through a lot with me. Counselor, tell me more about that. Marcus, I don't know. She's tired of worrying. Counselor, what do you think she's worried about? Marcus, that I will get another DUI. Counselor, and what do you think? Marcus, I don't want another one. Counselor, not wanting another one sounds important. Marcus, yeah, definitely. I cannot afford one. Cost me like $10,000. Counselor, what else concerns you? Marcus, honestly, my kids. Counselor, tell me about them. Marcus, I don't want them seeing me get drunk. So stop your video and finish the conversation. Look at column 2 now, so fill that in. Welcome back. What was different? Maybe more listening, less advice, more questions, reflections instead of arguments. And notice this one because it's measurable. The client talked more. In the first conversation, I did most of the talking. In the second, Marcus did. And here's the part I want you to catch. I never told Marcus once that he should stop drinking. He told us why he might want to. Another DUI, he can't afford, his kids seeing him drunk. Those are his reasons in his words, and he will believe them in a way that he would have never believed me. So, why reflection works. We do this in counseling, right? We've been taught how to do this, and this is just a good reminder. So let's name the mechanism. When people feel understood, they become less defensive. When they are less defensive, they become more curious. When they are more curious, they start examining their own behavior. Reflection is not an agreement. Reflection is understanding. Right? Watch how that works when a client comes in kind of hostile. Okay, so we're going to do one more. Client, I'm only here because the judge made me. Counselor, so this was not your choice. Client, exactly. Counselor, and yet you are here. So notice we're not arguing. We're not correcting. We agreed with the true part, and then we open the door. Our next segment today is about the ORs, which are the 4 core skills. So everything that you just watched in that second conversation ran on these 4 basic communication skills. Together they spell ORs. So 1 is open questions, A is the affirmations, R is the reflections, and S is the summaries. Open questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries. Everything else in the motivational interviewing is built on top of them. So, open questions invite storytelling. Closed questions invite one-word answers. Do you drink every day? What role does alcohol play in your life? So the first one gets you a yes or no, and the second one gives you a person telling the story about their life, which is the only place that clinical information actually lives. So I want you to pause for a second, and on your worksheet there are 3 closed questions. I want you to rewrite each one as an open question. So pause it and do that on your worksheet. Welcome back. Here's where I would steer you. Okay. Do you use marijuana? Becomes, tell me about your marijuana use. Are you angry? Becomes, how have you been feeling lately? Did you relapse? Becomes, walk me through what happened. So notice the last one especially. Did you relapse? Asks a person to kind of confess, walk me through what happened. Ask them to tell a story. Yeah, I had a really big fight with my girlfriend. I care about her very much. I don't want to lose her. And then I went in the garage and I drank. Right? Same information, completely different outcome. Affirmations recognize strengths, not successes. And this distinction matters a lot more than it sounds. So, what is wrong with saying a good job? You did a good job, right? We could say that. But it's generic, and it can also sound patronizing, especially to an adult that's maybe being praised by someone that they don't know very well, that they, don't trust yet, which might be you. And it also rewards outcome, which means that if it stops working, the outcome goes badly. So some motivational affirmations they're pretty specific and they're grounded in something that you actually observed. So, wow, you really care about your children. It took a lot of courage to come in here today. You've been thinking seriously about this for a while. So if a client says, I'm scared, I'm becoming like my father, what strengths do you hear? Insight, honesty, self-awareness, courage. That client just said one of the hardest sentences of their week, probably out loud to you. And there's a lot to affirm in that, and none of it requires them to have changed anything yet, right? Wow, that seems really brave to say that. Uh, that must be a really difficult thing to admit, right? R is for reflection. So reflections are kind of the heart of motivational interviewing. So experienced MI counselors often make 2 or 3 reflections for every question that they ask. And that ratio is worth remembering because most beginners run the opposite way and turn the session into an interview. So a reflection is not repeating, it's just showing the client that you are listening for meaning. So the client says something like, I'm exhausted. And the reflection is, man, you're feeling really overwhelmed right now. Client says, I don't know if the treatment will work. And the reflection part of you wants hope, and another part of you wants hope, and then part of you has been disappointed before, right? That second one is doing something a little bit more advanced. It names both sides of the ambivalence without picking one. So I want you to hold on to that because the next segment is entirely about that. And then summaries, gather the conversation and hand them back to the client. So today we've talked about your concern for your children, your fear of another DUI, and how uncertain you feel about giving up drinking. At the same time, you are starting to wonder whether some of these changes might be worth considering. So listen to what that does. It collects everything Marcus said in its own words, and he plays it back one piece at a time so he can hear the shape of it. A good summary is often a bridge to change because it is the first time that the client hears their own reasons kind of stacked together. So on the worksheet, exercise A is kind of the replacement for a breakout room that we were going to have. Jordan is a 20-year-old college student. Students you're going to write a full set of OR's responses. So now it's your turn, and this is kind of where the worksheet kind of stops being note-taking and starts being a little bit of practice. So exercise A, you're going to meet Jordan. They're 20 years old. They're a college student. They drink heavily on the weekend. Jordan's friends think that is completely normal, and Jordan has just failed 2 classes. Jordan says college is stressful and drinking is how everyone relaxes. And your job is not to convince Jordan to stop drinking. Your job is to write out 1 open-ended question, 2 reflections, 1 affirmation, and 1 closing summary. And you're not allowed to give advice. You're not allowed to lecture. You're not allowed to problem solve. And it's going to be hard at first. So there's some lesson in the discomfort, right? And we're going to come back and talk about it. So I want you to, again, pause the video and focus on that Jordan session on your worksheet. If you are done with the Jordan section, we're going to talk about it. So one of the things that we look at is the biggest shifts is kind of the shifts in motivational interviewing thinking and how that goes. As counselors, we spend an enormous amount of energy on what we should say next, and motivational interviewing asks a different question. What is the client already saying that moves them towards change? And that shift from talking to clients to listening for motivation is kind of the whole ball game, right? So think back to Marcus. At what point did he start sounding different? Probably when he mentioned his wife, when he said he didn't want another DUI, when he talked about his kids. Those moments matter because Marcus was not repeating any of my ideas. He was expressing his own concerns. And that's what motivational interviewing calls change talk. So there's 2 kinds of talk. One of the biggest misconceptions about motivational interviewing is that we're trying to eliminate resistance. We are not. People who are ambivalent will almost always express both sides of the conflict. Part of them wants to keep using. Part of them wonders if life could be different. Both are true at once, and both will show up in the same session and sometimes in the same sentence. Our job is not to argue with one side. It's to strengthen the side that is already moving. So I want you to listen to this sentence. I know drinking is causing problems, but it's the only way I relax. The first half is, I know that drinking is causing problems. That is change talk. The second half is, it is the only way that I relax. And that is the sustain talk. Most clients speak both languages kind of in the same breath. Ambivalence isn't resistance, it's normal. You have to say to yourself, I really should exercise, but I'm exhausted after work. I want to save money, but I also want to travel. Congratulations, you're human, right? So here's what happens when a counselor responds only to the sustained talk. Client, I know drinking is hurting my marriage, but alcohol also helps me relax. Counselor, let's talk about some healthier coping skills. What message did that just send? Maybe that the marriage doesn't matter. The client handed us all the things that they care most about in the world, and we kind of walked straight past them into coping skills. Motivational interviewing teaches us how to listen for the doorway. When a client opens it, even just slightly, we step through it gently. There is a way to hear change talk more precisely, and it comes in 2 stages. The first 4 letters are DARN. This is a funny acronym, okay? So DARN, D is desire, A is ability, R is reasons, and N is need. These are the early signs that someone is considering change. Desire sounds like, I wish I could quit. I would like things to be different. I don't want my kids seeing me like this. Ability sounds like, I quit once before. I think I should cut back. I've handled hard things before. Reasons are the specifics. My health, my children, my job, my money, my marriage. And notice something. Those are their reasons and they are not ours. And then need carries the most emotion. I have to do something. This cannot keep happening. I am tired of living like this. Then, as motivation strengthens, language gets stronger, and this is CAT. So the acronyms are DARN, CAT. So CAT is commitment, activation, and taking steps. Commitment sounds like I am going to call treatment. Activation sounds like I am ready. Taking steps sounds like I went to my first meeting. You can hear a client move across the sequence over weeks and sometimes even in a single session. So I want you to look at your worksheet and log DARN, CAT with one example of each. If you need an example, think about Marcus's case, and of course you can expand on it as needed. So DARN, desire, ability, reasons, and need, and CAT, commitment, activation, and taking steps. So we're going to pause this for a moment. I want you to complete that part. All right, you can unpause. Welcome back. So I'm going to read 6 statements. I don't want you to overthink them, but I want you to mark each one on your worksheet as change talk or sustain talk. And then pause the video before I give you the answers. So 1, I do not think I drink more than my friends. 2, my daughter cried when she saw me drunk. 3, I have tried treatment before and I have failed. 4, I am tired of waking up hungover. 5, I do not think anyone understands what I've been through. 6, I do not want to lose my family. So pause it now and think about all 6. All right, so number 1, I do not think I drink more than my friends. That is sustained talk. It's comparison that makes the drinking normal. Number 2, my daughter cried when she saw me drunk. That is change talk, and it's strong. There is no argument in that sentence, just an image that maybe the client can't unsee. 3, I have tried treatment before and it's failed. This one's hard, right? It leans to sustain because it has a barrier, right? But listen to what happens if the client keeps going. I've tried treatment before and it failed, and maybe I need a different approach this time. Now we've moved into change talk. So this is why we have to listen to the whole story, right? And let them have that narrative. Number 4, I'm tired of waking up hungover. That's change talk. That is a need statement, and you can hear the emotions in it. Number 5, I do not think anyone understands what I've been through. That's likely sustained talk, and we have to be careful with it, right? So that sentence is asking for some empathy, not a debate. So we don't argue with it. We just, okay, yep, right? Number 6, I do not want to lose my family. That is strong change talk. And I want you to look back around of your 6. Notice how often the change talk is attached to a value rather than a consequence. Interesting, right? Not the DUI, not the daughter, not our liver, not the family. People change for what they love much more reliably than what they fear. Our last idea for this part is resistance is information, not opposition. So when clients argue with us, we get curious. Think about what happens when someone argues with you. Our instinct is probably to argue back, to defend ourselves, to explain why we are right, and that's human. And motivational interviewing asks us to do something completely counterintuitive with it. Client says, I don't think the treatment works. An inexperienced counselor says, it does work, or you need to try, or you just have not committed. But what would motivational interviewing sound like instead? You've been disappointed before, or it sounds like you have lost some hope, or tell me about your past experiences with it. Notice we are not agreeing that the treatment doesn't work. We are understanding why this person believes that it does not. And those are different things, and only one of them keeps the client in the room. I want you to focus on exercise B. This is going to replace another breakout room we were going to have in class. So Ashley is 41, has had 4 residential treatments and a recent relapse. Okay? And today she says 2 things back to back. 1, maybe I'm just one of those people that's never going to change. And then she says, and I hate what I'm doing to my kids. So if we listened, right, the sustained talk is the first sentence and the change talk is the second. Your job in exercise B is only to respond to the change talk in writing. So we're not going to give advice, we're not going to problem solve, we're not going to suggest treatment, and we're not going to tell Ashley that it's going to be okay, right? So we get reflections, open-ended questions, affirmations, and a summary. That's all. So we are going to pause here, and I want you to write down what you would say to Ashley. If you have paused and you're coming back, Everybody wants to fix this, especially when there's children involved. We all want to enter this field because we want to reduce suffering. And motivational interviewing is not asking us about caring less, it's asking us to trust the client can find their own way there. And we just kind of stay beside them while they do that. So before we close, we're going to put motivational interviewing kind of into the bigger frame of this course. So systems treatment starts from the recognition that recovery isn't linear, right? Clients move through stages of readiness. They have setbacks. They often return to treatment more than once. And IST does not treat that as failure, right? It treats it as the shape of the process, and it asks us to meet clients where they are and build on their strengths. And motivational interviewing fits into IST so beautifully because they both reject the idea that clients need to be fixed. They emphasize collaboration, respect, and the belief that change is possible even when it's not happening on our timeline. When a client relapses, a motivational interview informed counselor does not ask, why did you fail? They ask, what did you learn? And instead of you were not committed enough, they ask, what got in the way that time? So the same event, the same client, those questions communicate hope, they preserve dignity, and they keep the relationship intact, right? And it predicts outcome, okay? If we do these things, if we follow the motivational interviewing structure, we can predict that it will probably go better than if we give advice. So section 7 on your worksheet, there are 10 items, 1 to 5, and then there are 3 reflection questions. So I want you to turn to section 7, and you're going to rate yourself honestly on 10 statements, 1 to 5, from not yet comfortable to very comfortable. And this is okay. It's just a self-rated activity. You're not turning this in. So it's not a test. Nobody's grading it. I'm not collecting it. I want you to be completely precise because there's nothing writing on it, right? And I want to flag one item before you go. There's a statement about being comfortable sitting in silence. And this one's harder than it sounds, and nobody rates themselves accurately on that until they've watched themselves fill a sentence on a video, on Listen, where you're watching and you're going, I should have just been quiet, right? So I want you to stop here and complete the full assessment plus the 3 reflections. Takes about 10 minutes. And then come back for the last few minutes. If you are back for the last few minutes, those 3 questions are your greatest strength and likely your biggest challenge, right? So the one thing that you can practice this week, not as a counselor, but as a person. The last one is deliberate. So practice it with your spouse, practice it with your kids, practice it at work. Practice it with a friend that's complaining about something that you already know how to solve. I know how this could get better for you, but practice it, right? Listen instead of fixing. And I want to leave you with one last thing. When William Miller first began researching motivational interviewing, the most surprising finding was not that certain techniques work better than others. It was that the quality of the relationship between counselor and client predicted outcomes more consistently than anything else, which is just amazing, right? So people remember how we made them feel long after they've forgotten what we said. It's tempting to believe that our expertise helps guide people, and motivational interviewing reminds us that our expertise just creates space. The client creates the change. So picture 2 counselors meeting the same client on the same day. The client says, I relapsed again. The first counselor says, let's talk about what you did wrong. The second says, you came back today. That tells me that you haven't given up. Same relapse, same client. One conversation begins with failure, the other one begins with hope. And hope is not a nicety. Hope, self-efficacy, and the therapeutic relationship are among the strongest predictors we have of substance abuse treatment outcomes. Motivational interviewing is built on all three. When clients believe that change is possible, they are sitting across from someone who believes it too, and they're more likely to stay in treatment and more likely to survive setbacks. As you move into internships, you are going to discover something. You will not remember every model perfectly. You will not always ask the right question. You will think of the perfect reflection about 10 minutes after the client has left the building. And that happens to everybody I know, right? Including me. But if a client leaves your office feeling respected, heard, understood, and believing that someone actually saw their strengths, you have already done something that matters. So I want to end with one question and just carry it with you. Okay? How do you want people to feel after they spend that hour with you? That is the heart of motivational interviewing. All right. You do not have to turn these worksheets in. They're simply for you. I know that I got you them a little bit late too, so there's no timeline here, but I hoped that you got a lot out of this session, and I will see you soon.